going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now.
Jimothy.
So ladies and gents, it's been a while, and do you know what? I've said to myself, this year I'm definitely going to make a lot more discussion videos alongside some of the content that I already post on the channel, i.e. live duels, deck profiles, all that kind of stuff. But I feel like the discussion is where it's at, and no better to start this off with a tier list. Now this tier list is only for the current format, which is probably going to last another 2.5 weeks potentially, maybe even a little bit less, whilst we wait for the arrival of Phantom Nightmares, so to speak. So without wasting any more time, ladies and gents, let's just get straight into it. So starting us off, in no particular order might I add, and there are going to be some decks on here that obviously I haven't included, but definitely get at me in the comment section below on where you would place yours. And just for a little bit of reference, we've got tier 1, tier 1.5, tier 2, Rogue, and I think I've made a mistake in picking this deck up. So starting us off, I'm going to start off with Dragon Link. Still a very solid deck, I'm not gonna lie, ladies and gents. Whoa, why is Mathmech just decided to just jump out of the cage? Let's put that guy back. Yeah, but Dragon Link anyway, very strong deck, consistent as always. I mean, I feel like the ban list didn't really do much to Dragon Link. It's just been in the same spot that it always was. But with the new generation of fire decks that are coming into the meta, I just don't feel like Dragon Link can keep up with the pace of the game, which is crazy to say, especially as Dragon Link was a very, very heavy combo board. And that's going to be some of the judgment for some of the other decks going forward, which is a little bit weird. So it's definitely a tier 2 deck. I wouldn't say it's tier 1.5. You will lose to it on occasions because it can play a couple of hand traps, quite a few hand traps to be honest, and still be able to just combo off of one card. Black Metal Dragon's crazy. So yeah, very interesting deck. Definitely tier 2. Plunder Patrol, as much as I do love this deck, it's definitely a rogue pick. It's very strong, it's very rewarding to play, but it just doesn't stand up to the meta. It's nice the fact that you can banish Fire King Island off your Plunder Patrol synchro. I can't remember the name for him. I think it's Bran. But yeah, that's where its application stops, especially with the way that the deck plays. It just can't keep up with the meta. Dinosaurs are a little bit interesting. I'm still going to leave them in Rogue though. Dinosaurs without Misk is weird. Do you know why? Because I feel like Misk pushes Dinosaurs over the edge. It makes them borderline like tier 1.5, tier 1 deck almost. Just because you just can't interact with their board, so they just get to play for free basically. No Imperm, no Ash, anything like that. Yeah, you can just play for free, especially with the monsters on field. But with only one Misk, that happening is less likely, so they're a little bit more fragile, and they do die on their normal summon if it gets stopped, depending on what their hand is. The addition of the new cards, which searches a field spell, and one of them searches polymerization. I think it's Kaitop Terror or something like that. It looks good, gives them additional normal summon as well, so it's going to be interesting to see where they land. But like I said previously, keeping up with the fire decks at the moment, I don't feel like Dinosaurs does enough to be able to do so. So yeah. Unchained, I'm going to put Unchained in tier 2. It's definitely fallen off. It's still a very strong deck, still does exactly what it used to do with less consistency. Shavara obviously was a big hit for them. I haven't really seen them too much, but I've got a few friends that are still playing Unchained and they're telling me that the deck's still good, so I'm going to leave it in tier 2 just because the ban list kind of swayed a few players away from Unchained, so it's going to be interesting to see where it lands. Branded is a difficult one. I'm going to put it at the top of tier 2. It could potentially even be in tier 1.5 right now. Branded is slept on at the moment. It still dies to Ash. Let's not get that twisted. But it plays in a way where it doesn't interact with the fire decks in such a significant way, so to speak. A lot of the fire decks look to pop cards, and I'm not talking about Phantom Nightmare format. I'm talking about like right now. The way that it plays is a little bit quirky in the sense of just a branded fusion can put so much pressure on your opponent. Masquerade is still a card, and if you know anything about the fire decks, they do a lot of stuff. I mean, all the stuff. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Branded. Gimmick Puppet luck is still a thing, so you still just can't play the game if they get to pull off that combo, and people are playing it because it just does that. You just can't play Yugioh. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where that falls. Orcust, more specifically the Horus Orcust. Do I want to put it in Rogue? I'm going to put it in Rogue. It's a very strong deck, and this goes for a lot of the Rogue decks, by the way. Even though they're in Rogue, they're still very, very strong, and it's just a statement to the state of the game, basically, because Rogue decks are just super powerful. Any of these Rogue decks that you just let go unhindered can set up a crazy board. Let's not get it twisted. But what happens is they're not as consistent, and they die to less interaction, so to speak. So it's very, very... It's easier to stop a Rogue deck than it is a meta deck from doing what it wants to do, and Orcus is kind of like epitomizes that. It can die to Droll. There are some ways that it plays around it, but I don't feel like the boards that it sets up at the moment are as strong as some of the fire decks. Infernoid, I'm going to put that in... At the moment, you know what, we're talking about right now. I'm going to put that in, I think I've made a mistake. Right now, it's not that good. But when it does get its support, and when Promethean Princess, or whatever her name is, makes an appearance, I do feel like this deck is going to be one to watch, especially with the way that it plays out of the graveyard. If they've got a stacked graveyard and you haven't killed them, it's very, very difficult for you to kind of like continue to push for the board, because they just get so much value out of like playing for their graveyard. And with the new support, they're looking super strong. So for now, I think I made a mistake. Tillaments, I'm gonna slap in Rogue, not gonna lie. Tillaments are so strong. I feel like when Light Swans come out and Light Swans get their new additional support, Tillaments will be somewhat playable again. But with most of the main deck names at 1, it doesn't do enough in my opinion. And with the Yugioh and Cowbeck bans, like, the deck is nowhere near as consistent as it was. It still can do stuff. Do not get it twisted. Like I said, if you just let this deck play uninterrupted, it will set up a stupid board. And with the addition of transaction rollback and the access to Beatrice through the hero line, like, there are going to be instances where you can actually just like lock your opponent out of the game, and that goes for a couple of decks along this tier list, so to speak. So it's definitely a Rogue deck. It's not as strong as some of the other decks that we've got going. Virtual World, again, I'm going to put this in... Is it above Tillaments? I don't know. I think so. I'd think it's at the top of Rogue. Yeah. I'm going to put Virtual World at the top of Rogue. Only because Virtual World can do some stupid stuff. Again, transaction rollback, has access to Beatrice, which I don't understand why it's still legal anyway. Especially as they knew that there was releasing transaction rollback. But Virtual World's consistency is its problem. If it was more consistent in terms of not opening up bricks, then it could potentially be a lot better. It does a lot of things. I've seen it play through a lot, especially with the Brave engine. It can do a whole heap of stuff, but the consistency is what lets it down. And it can actually play a couple of the decks in the format pretty easily. It doesn't worry about like shifter and all those kind of things, which is another counter argument to some of the fire decks. But yeah, it's just not consistent enough in my opinion. Goatee, I'm going to put this in Rogue, but it's one to watch. With the new support that's coming out, I feel like Goatee is going to be super strong. The ability to just continuously make plays, as well as just interrupt your opponent time after time, as well as being able to play shifter, it says a lot for the deck. The new support definitely going to push this over the edge, but at the time being, right now, it's just a Rogue deck. Whether you play it with Runic, whether you play it pure, it's still just Rogue at the moment. Exo Sisters, I'm going to put tier 2. There's only one reason I'm putting Exo Sisters in tier 2, and that is Dimension Shifter. It can play Dimension Shifter. It's got a fairly solid game plan. Going first, it has a lot of interaction, a lot of banishing, which is a little bit problematic for some of the decks in the format. It's not the strongest deck. It's very xenophobic. You can't really do much outside of Exo Sister things, and some of their monsters just aren't strong enough. But it can play Shifter, and that alone can like win a lot against a lot of the top decks in the format right now. Labyrinth, I'm going to put in tier 1.5, and it's a shame about Labyrinth. Like, they've got transaction rollback, they've got everything they could potentially ever want, but they're still not the top deck, because Fire Kings just obliterates this deck. It could even be turned 0, and Fire Kings do enough to slow down Labyrinth. It's just silly. So Fire Kings can just pop cards. Like, it's crazy what the deck can do, and it's unfortunate for Labyrinth. We're in this format where There's a lot of interaction, which means Labyrinth loses a lot of value. Being able to play turn 0 is fine, but negging your hand and then running into a negate is just horrible. Transaction rollback will mitigate some of those problems, but it's unfortunate that it can't just be tier 1, even just for a little bit. Dark World, I'm going to put in Rogue. In fact, I'm going to put Dark World in I think I've made a mistake, and this comes with a caveat. Going first, game 1, you lose against Dark. In fact, you don't even need to lose the die roll. Just playing against Dark World in game 1, if you have got nothing to stop their engine, they can plow through a majority of fields. They've got so many effects that can resolve. They just keep going and going and going. Going first, they'll just hand loop you and then set up an unbreakable board, which just basically is an FTK. But going second, it's just so easy to counter. You side in draws. If you play shifter, you play shifter. Like, the deck dies to just like a very, very minimal interactions. You can try and tech your deck out to beat Droll and Lockbird, but if you're doing that, you're paying for it in the terms of consistency, and Dark World needs a fair amount of engine pieces in order to facilitate its combos and play through interruption, so to speak. So yeah, I do like this deck. It's not weak by any means, but I probably just wouldn't play it right now. Gold Pride, I'm going to leave this in. I think I've made a mistake. In fact, I'm going to put Dark Worlds at the top of that, because I do believe it's probably at the top of... I think I made a mistake. Gold Pride, this was tipped to be just like something crazy, and I do still like this deck, but a lot of the hand traps that have been played in the format stop this deck. Droll being one of them. Ash Blossom on the Fusion Monster. It's just, yeah... It just doesn't do enough. It does set up a nice board in terms of there's a lot of interaction, but it's not a board that's formidable. There's boards that are out there that are a lot stronger and less, it requires less investment, so to speak. So yeah, that's why I'm putting Dark Worlds there. Earthbounds, these are interesting. I'm going to put these probably a little bit above the Exo Sisters. Earthbounds are interesting. And I'm not talking about pure Earthbounds, because that deck just is unplayable. But as an engine, it can actually slide into a couple of strategies. Chimera being one, Runic being the other, and it's a little bit untested with some of the other decks in the format. Now, Earthbound have got a nice gameplay loop. You only need to play one Harmonic Synchro Fusion as well as one Field Spell, and you can continuously just add that play. And the value you get out of sending 2 monsters off the field and getting 2 extra deck monsters is crazy, and those extra deck monsters are pretty decent. I'm not gonna lie, ladies and gents, they can do a few things, so it's definitely one to watch. It's tier 2 at the moment, definitely. I wouldn't say it's Rogue, only because if you're mixing it with Runic inherently is just strong, so I do feel like because of that, it's probably a little bit above some of the decks that we've got down here, just because Runic just does Runic things. You can actually just play the deck, not see any Earthbound cards, and still be able to kind of like do something because of the Runic card. So yeah, Chimera, I'm gonna put this in Rogue. For me, it's a bit too linear. It's consistent in what it does, but it's a little bit too linear. Now, the builds that I'm seeing are typically the branded lines or the branded Chimera, which I'm seeing, but we're starting to see a few experimentation with some of the other stuff, especially with the slow drip feeding of the illusion monsters that we're slowly starting to get. I feel like Chimera could be like one to watch for the future, but right now everybody knows what the deck's doing. Like, you stop in Mirror Sword Knight or the Big Wig Baphomet, and that's it. That's the end of their play, like literally. So yeah, it is what it is. Pearly, I'm gonna put in tier 1.5. Pearly's still Pearly, does Pearly things. It's strong. It's got a little bit less consistent, but it's still annoying to deal with the towers, and it can just play a buttload of non-engine. So yeah, the deck makes itself viable just because of that alone. Kashtira, do you know what? I'm gonna put Kashtira in tier 1.5. This is very, very unassuming, but this deck has been making waves just because of the nature of the deck. Now, I've seen a few ways that people have been playing it. They've gone either the Kashtira like Cyburst line, where they're going into Heat Soul to draw cards and kind of like facilitate them drawing into non-engine, or they've just gone the straight Kashtira, like summon 4 monsters. That's like, I don't know, Fenrir, Unicorn, as well as the Ogre, have a trap set, couple of hand traps, and that's sometimes enough to just see them out through the game. And it's crazy what the deck can do. It can also play shifter. It's probably the best shifter deck, to be honest, just because of how strong the the Kashtira monsters are by themselves. They're like pseudo boss monsters basically. You don't have the greatest of extra deck like tools to go through because the rank 7 pool is fairly limited at the moment. But any kind of like rank 7 that does anything will definitely boost this deck in terms of its power. And Unicorn's at 3, Birth is at 3. Birth is like low-key crazy against some of the fire decks out there because it could just banish a load of stuff out the graveyard if they play like any kind of like spell. So very, very strong deck. Something that I was actually considering playing myself because I don't really want to invest in bonfires as well as like the Diabell Star stuff. So Kashtira definitely interesting. Synchrons, I'm gonna go in Rogue. This is another one of those decks. If it goes unhindered, you can't really play the game. But it dies to a fair few interactions. Droll is its biggest enemy. And it's, yeah, to be honest, I'm going to say it's stronger than some of these decks out here. Probably not as strong as Virtual World, because when Virtual World doesn't brick, it's actually quite a decent deck. But even the Synchron adventure build still has its problems. So, yeah. Outlich, oh boy, how have the mighty have fallen. Oh my days. This is definitely I made a mistake. Don't play Outlich, ladies and gents. As much as I really wanted to play him at the time of his release, like right now, I just don't feel like he's the best option. Because the nature of traps are just too slow. Like you can potentially set 4 and have 4 traps just get, well, 2 of those just get blown up on, I don't know, end phase or something like that. Especially the way that the Fire King monsters play. If the search is Skyburn, it's horrible. The deck doesn't go second well. If Outlich gets removed from the graveyard, there's no real way of bringing him back. It's just, yeah, it's just not a good idea, ladies and gents. Just not a good idea. Centurion, I'm gonna put this in tier 2. This deck's solid. The main reason is it's got a 1-card combo. Simple as that. And it can play like, I don't know, is it 21 or 19 non-engine? I think its engine's like 21 cards. So you've got like 19 cards potentially if you're playing a 40-card list to be able to just slot in whatever you want. That could be like, I don't know, hand traps, could be board breakers, could be floodgates, just whatever. And this deck can play. It's got 1-card combo. Field spell's crazy. It's got protection. Very simple gameplay. So in terms of like going into like a YCS or a regional or anything like that, it's not taxing on the mind to play, whereas some of the other combo decks that aren't so linear are. So it's got its advantages, and for that reason I'm putting it in tier 2. Vanadium, ooh, this is definitely going in tier 1.5. Just because of the way that you can take the deck out, you can put a boatload of going second cards in. I'm talking about like enemy controllers, thrust, triple tactics talents, which probably are already in the list anyway. But going first, it can set up an FTK. Like it's literally just too much interaction. Like it will burn your 5 negates, especially if you try to hand trap the deck and it's actually just played through the hand trap. It's crazy. The only issue is fire decks outpace it. There's just too much interaction, and the fire decks are a little bit silly right now. So yeah, Math Mech, oh my days, why did it do circular dirty like that? Like, don't play Math Mech at the moment, ladies and gents, just because the whole idea of circular was to tutor the trap out of the deck while setting up your graveyard. Now you have to jump through so many hoops in order to do that. It just makes it not worth it. And literally the boss monsters for Math Mech aren't good at the moment. Final Sigma, it's easy enough to deal with. I mean, even if you play the Math Mech trap that gives it an attack boost, there's decks that can just easily get over that. It's not even a joke. Like Fire Kings can get over that with a main deck monster, which is crazy to think about. So yeah, it's just just don't play Math Mech at the moment, ladies and gents, as much as it pains me to say so. Fluunderies, I love this deck. I love it, but I don't like playing against it, put it that way. Just no. Like, playing against this deck is a no-no, ladies and gents. But it's very strong. In fact, I'm going to put it up a little bit. It's probably... You know what? I need to move Labyrinth down a little bit. In fact, and I'll leave Labyrinth there. Oof. You know what? We'll put it here. We'll put it here. Next to Kashtira. Just because I don't know the order of these two. Fluunderies is a little bit like Virtual World in the sense where it can actually lose to itself because of the bricking issue. But with 6 pots, triple field spell, triple advent, like you are going to find your stuff. And being able to search Harpy's Featherstorm off Frost is busted going first. That's basically saying to your opponent, I don't care if you're playing a fire deck, you're just not playing the game. You're not resolving any monster effects. Normal summon your monster, let's get it going. And then Empen's a floodgate by itself anyway. So yeah, it's crazy. So I hate playing against this deck, but I like the deck. In fact, I love the deck. It does its own thing. It's always done its own thing, and for that reason, I like it. Infernoble, boy, oh boy, I'm gonna slap this in. I'll put it in Rogue. There's a few things, especially with the new Flame Swordsman stuff that's just come out, ladies and gents. It could potentially do something, but without I Sold, like all of those equip spells that you would potentially have normally have played in an Infernoble list. I don't know what you do with them now, and those were some of the strongest like extenders or facilitators in the deck. Like, what are you doing with some of those equip spells now? Like, how are you shooting them out? You're literally playing Durandos and Owl Maces and just the in-archetype ones, which seems to be a little bit of a shame, especially when you got a card like Renaud out there. But we'll have to see what this Flame Swordsman stuff does, because they are Fire Warriors. They might have some synergy with the deck, and it might take the deck in a little bit of a different direction instead of like quote-unquote I Soul Turbo. Bestial Dragon Link. Sorry, not Bestial Dragon Link. Bestial Runic. That's why I've put this one there. I'd say it's a tier 2. It's got its issues. A lot of the monsters, a lot of the cards target if you're looking at the runic cards, but it's a solid strategy. It can actually do a lot. It deals with SP Little Knight in a very, very unique way, especially if your opponent makes it and then uses its effects. Like Branded Regain could tuck the opponent's SP Little Knight back into the deck and then draw itself a card as a result of it. So that interaction is nice, but it's not just about that. It's all the other stuff that's going on. It's difficult to say the least. Yeah, it's very, very difficult. Sky Striker, boy, oh boy. I'm going to put this in, I think I've made a mistake. Sky Striker's decent. Like, at a local level, when you're facing other rogue decks, Sky Striker just stomps. Like, it's silly. But if you're taking that to like a regional, a YCS, I don't know, nationals for example, you're gonna struggle. Don't get me wrong, there's gonna be some Sky Striker player that tops and is gonna do crazy with the deck, and it's gonna be really good. But in essence, not everybody's going to be able to do that, and I feel like there's just other decks that you could play out there that are a little bit better at the moment. And somebody even said it to me before, like, it just doesn't feel good to play Sky Strikers at this moment in time. It might do in the future, especially with some of the extra deck monsters that we're getting, as well as that main deck monster that just specs one from deck that's busted. But yeah, at the moment, it's definitely just, I don't know, I think you've made a mistake playing it. Rescue Ace tier 1, don't even lie. The reason Rescue Ace is tier 1 is because it doesn't overly do anything. Let me say this correctly, because I don't want to get flamed in the comments. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. But Rescue Ace is a mid-range deck that has a solid game plan, and because of that, it has a lot of coverage over all the other matchups. It can actually facilitate a combo if it really wanted to. It can put monsters and bodies on the field, but it can also play the slow, grindy game with Turbulence. Setting 4 from your deck is just busted, which targeted negation is the only real way to deal with it. And if your opponent's wise to it, they're going to be making SP Little Knight anyway. So with that in mind, Rescue Ace is probably the top of the meta at the moment, just because of the nature of the deck. And the Diabellstar Snake Eye stuff just makes it even more busted. So yeah, it's definitely a tier 1 deck. Generator Runic, that's Rogue. It's interesting. Hand looping your opponent's busted. Going seconds where it struggles. I'm not gonna lie. Like, you need so many cards to be able to go second. In fact, that's a lie. You don't, because of the runic stuff. But if you're playing into a Rescue Ace board, for example, like, you're gonna be struggling. If you're playing into, a branded board, for example, you're gonna be struggling, because branded will just like pop field spells, it's just Guardian Chimera is busted. So I don't know, it struggles. It has its merits. Going first, it's busted. If you're good at winning in dice rolls, then I'd suggest play this deck, because it's a better Dark World in a sense, because it's got two types of game plan. It can go generate a beatdown, or it can just go like runic control, it's a nice way to play, but it struggles a little bit going second. That's why I'm putting it in Rogue. Vanquish Soul, I'm going to slap this at the top of tier 2. This could potentially even be a tier 1.5 deck. And I know I'm a little bit biased because I love Vanquish Soul. I've actually put it away in my folder because I don't want to be tempted to play it at the moment. I'm in the Vanquish Soul group on Facebook, and there's been a few discussions about the deck having one more wave of support, and it's going to be interesting to see if we get like a field spell or something like that. We're also getting an OT rock in the next OTS tournament pack, so it's going to be interesting to see what Vanquish Soul can do. It's a solid deck. It's got a solid game plan. It doesn't have any negates, however, it does have a lot of interaction, and if you know how to play the deck correctly, you can do a lot. I've seen a few lists. I was experimenting with a few lists. You can experiment with like Sword Soul, Long Yuan, as well as the Sword Soul Emergence, and just try and burn your opponent to death, which I think is pretty funny, to be honest. Especially if you're playing into decks that like to like pay life points to kind of like activate field spells or whatever, or activate spells. So it's interesting. Very solid deck. It doesn't actually do anything inherently unfair, which is why it always, in my opinion, will be a tier 2 deck, unless we get some support that just makes it busted. Fire Kings, oh boy, I'm going to put this at the top of tier 1. I think it's even probably a little bit better than Rescue Ace. This deck has got way too much interaction. I'm talking about now, let alone what happens when we see Phantom Nightmare, as well as the introduction of Populace. Like, this deck can do loads with the Snake Eye stuff, without the Snake Eye stuff. I do feel like the Snake Eye stuff is probably going to be the better build, and even now it can do quite a few things, but this deck just does too much. It's got way too much interaction. It's just, yeah, it's strong. That's all I need to say. Mekanko, this is fell off. This is rough. Yeah. You made a mistake. Playing it before, it had a nice bit of a win con, mainly because of Isolde and like Acid Golem, but now, ladies and gents, don't do it to yourself. It can still probably facilitate that combo, but it's nowhere near as strong. Scareclaw, I think it's pretty solid. I'm going to put it here. It's probably above these, but below Dragon Link. Dragon Link's just way too consistent. But yeah, Scareclaw's got a solid game plan. And I'm specifically talking about Scareclaw Kashtira. Scareclaw as a pure deck, like Scareclaw Brave, it's good, but I don't think it's like overly good. But Scareclaw Kashtira, on the other hand, is, because Kashtira cards are just strong anyway. It's a little bit, yeah. So it's something worth investigating, to be honest. And I haven't done my due diligence on this deck, and I'm planning to do so. I need to kind of like figure out a build where I can squeeze in some like hand traps, because at the moment the way that I've been trying to play it is with a lot of engine. But yeah, it's a solid deck. Say no more. Sprite tier 1.5. I don't care what anybody says. Sprite gets a little bit of buff. I think there's a card coming out. I forgot what it's called. EMP Greswold. Is it Greswold? I'll put an image on screen for you, ladies and gents. But that card helps the deck. It's just another form of interaction, and it does stuff in the graveyard. Sprite can play Shifter. In fact, let me move this up. What am I doing? Sprite can play Shifter. Sprite plays Gamma Burst. Going first, it can set up like a half decent board with at least 3 negates, as well as a permanent Snatch Steal. So I think Sprite is solid. In fact, I probably think it's probably above Labyrinth, to be honest. In line with like Pearly. Sprite is solid. Just say no more. It can make Zeus. Like, it does a whole load of things. So yeah. Salamangreat, ooh. At the moment, I'm going to say it's tier 2. I'm going to put it somewhere down here. It's probably a little bit better than Scareclaw. Salamangreat doesn't play like your traditional Cyberse pile. It actually plays something closer to like Marincess, where you just got a big boss monster on field, a couple of back row, and some hand traps. But the follow up in Salamangreat is just crazy. Like, you will grind, you will play for days. It's got a solid game plan. You can loop Mirage Stalio time after time and just whittle your opponent out of resources. Resetting your traps is just crazy in of itself. So I feel like it's solid. Going first, it's solid. It does die to Nibiru at times, but with the addition of Fire Recovery, it doesn't die as much as you would think it would right now, because once its engine gets going, it doesn't really necessarily need to play with its hands. It just plays with a graveyard, which is effectively a second hand. And then that means you've always got a card to discard or send to the graveyard for fire recovery, just to bring back your, I don't know, Raging Phoenix, for example, or a Sunlight Wolf, for example. So very, very solid deck and can fit a ton of non-engine, which is needed right now, ladies and gents, just because these two decks up here are just silly. Specifically Fire Kings, because they just pop and pop and pop and interact and pop, as well as Rescue Ace just having too many resources, like 8 cards on field at some points, just because of Turbulence setting 4, like it's busted. So I do like Salamangreat for that reason. But that is it, ladies and gents. Let me know what you think. If there's any decks that you feel like I've missed out on, definitely get at me in that comment section below. I'm always open to it. Let's get a little discussion going down there. And if you've got any ideas for any kind of techs in any of these decks that would potentially push it over the edge, let me know, ladies and gents. I'm open to it. I'm all for trying, testing, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we find ourselves at the end of another video. As always, if you did like this content, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff. And I will definitely see you guys on the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.